This looks a little wonky, but today we are ranking all of Nikon's current portrait lenses from best to worst. These are some of my favorite videos to make for two reasons. One, I can do it in my skivvies. Two, it really hurts the feelings of all the ladies in the comment section. Yeah, that's right. You know what I said. I think first, let's just knock out the best and the worst. I think the best, personally, the NIKKOR Z 85mm f1.2s. And it's not just because it's my favorite lens of all time, it's just because it screams portraiture. 85 is a classic portrait focal length. I think this has the best optics. It has inherent beauty. It has everything you want out of not just a lens, but out of a portrait lens. It's just perfect. This lens is perfection. So we are giving the NIKKOR Z 85mm f1.2s first place. In last place, you may actually think that I would probably choose the NIKKOR Z 24 to 200 f4 to 6.3, because if you've watched for a long time, you know that I absolutely hate this lens. However, I'm actually giving last place to the 28 to 400 millimeter because of the aperture, because of the size, because it's just too much. And this lens just does a lot of things better than portraits. And the one thing that the 24 to 200 I think would probably be more convenient for this lens is, even though I hate that fucking lens, I think it would just be easier for portraits. So we're going to give this 22nd place. And by the way, I'm not saying any of these lenses are bad. We're just ranking them specifically for portraits. And for portraits, I just think that this is kind of a bad option. The 100 to 400 f4.5 to 5.6s. Now, I get it. This lens has great contrast, some of the best contrast in the entire lineup. But again, this lens does a lot of things better than portraits. I don't consider this a portrait lens. Will it do portraits? Yes. But is it a portrait lens? Absolutely not. And it seems kind of foolish to have this. Even if you do like a little bit of portraits, I think you'd be better off with like the 51.8. Because you're mostly like a wildlife guy, and so you use this for wildlife, but occasionally you do portraits, get you like a 50 millimeter or something. This lens just, it's not bad. This is actually a very good lens. It's just not a portrait lens. It just fits into the focal range of 50 to 135. That's probably a good time to mention, if you didn't see the original video, to see the criteria that I'm choosing the best Nikon portrait lenses for, there is a range. There's a link in the description. You can watch that video first and then come back to this one. Now, I think probably we can go ahead and put what is, in my opinion, the worst lens in the Nikon Z Mount lineup, optically and performance-wise. The 24 to 200 f4 to 6.3. I absolutely hate this lens. It's just more convenient for portraits, and that's why it's not dead last. Now, I know that there's some people that absolutely love the 24 to 200 f4 to 6.3, and they try to beat me up in the comments, and so I want to do something a little special for you. Just because, like, I want us to be friends, I want us to get along. I mean, you can see I didn't give it last place because I'm actually unbiased, okay? I'm honest with my opinions. There, just so we can be friends again, I went ahead and gave the 24 to 200 f4 to 6.3 an honorary last place title. I really can't just like fill in like 12th place and 17th place, and so let's start kind of filling in from the second. I think the second best portrait lens is probably the NIKKOR Z 135mm f1.8 S Plena. Now, why isn't this first place? If anything, the fact that this has perfect bokeh, it may actually give it a leg up on the 85mm f1.2, just because it has those things that are just kind of make it more perfect for portraits. Dadgummit. So the 85mm f1.2s is my favorite lens of all time. I prefer it over this. It's more inherently beautiful, but the fact that this has that little special ability, and this has inherent beauty as well. The 85 does not have this beat on optics by very much. And it doesn't have it beat very much on performance either. I think just because the bokeh is absolutely perfect, and the time that the bokeh really matters is for portraits, I actually think that it's fair I set my biases aside and actually give the NIKKOR Z 135 f1.8 S Plena first place, and then move the 85 1.2 to second place. Because technically for portraits, this has perfect bokeh. This doesn't. I think that the 85 is more beautiful, but we're talking portraits here. And setting my biases aside, I legitimately think that this is probably technically only by a hair a better portrait or a better lens for portraits. It is Nikon's premier portrait lens. I may change my mind later. In third place for now, I want to give it to the 70 to 200 millimeter f2.8s. Because of how fast it is, you can do any kind of portraits, action portraits, it will keep up. I don't find this lens to be particularly beautiful in the optics, but you can't overlook the fact that 70 to 200 f2.8s are kind of quintessential working portrait photographer lenses. So for now, I will give this third place, and we'll move on. Maybe that'll change in a little bit. I'm not sure. Actually, no, I want to knock that down already, because for sure, I want the NIKKOR Z 105 millimeter f2.8s to be higher. This has everything you want. The fact that it is a macro lens just gives you extra things that you can do. But even if this wasn't a macro lens, I would consider this to be a top choice for a portrait lens, which I said in the other video. This is a no-brainer. I want this to be in third place for now. And we'll leave the 70 to 200 in fourth place. I'm sitting here kind of scratching my head a little bit because I don't know what I want to do next. Even though the 50 millimeter f1.2s is my former favorite lens of all time, and it's beautiful for portraits. It's a little bit slow. I mean, almost unmatched in its just like inherent beauty of its images, but because it's, I guess, maybe not as versatile, maybe, and it's actually, who would be in fifth place? Hang on a second. Let me look at both of them, try to gather my thoughts. I'm really trying to figure out if fifth place should be the 50 millimeter f1.2 or the 24 to 70 f2.8s. This is definitely more versatile, even though the range we're looking at is 50. I just can't quite overlook that. I mean, if we're talking 50 to 70, it's not that. I'm going to revert to just inherent beauty, like what is going to give you an edge over other portrait photographers. I think the added beauty of the 50 millimeter f1.2 kind of makes it better for fifth place, but this is a really hard decision. This is probably going to get me in trouble in the comments, but I'm going to put the 24 to 70 f2.8s as sixth place. Dang it. Because I need to, no, because see, I don't really find the 85 millimeter f1.8s, I don't find it to be particularly, let me get a sip of coffee real quick. The 85 millimeter f1.8s, I don't find it to be a particularly great lens overall. I think it's kind of a bad value. Now, it's absolutely incredibly sharp, okay? And it has good contrast. It's just kind of flat and kind of boring, but because it's an 85 1.8, it's like most people would consider, and forget what other people say, I don't consider this to be, we're going to put it like right here for now. Okay, I'm having some thoughts about the 24 to 50, f4 to 6.3, and I actually might want to put this in dead last because the criteria is 50 to 135. So this lens at 50 fits into this ranking, but it's a 50 f6.3 and you would never buy that. And 50 is not a great focal length to be shooting portraits at 6.3. You can get away with that at like 150 millimeters or something. Like more telephoto, stopping it down isn't that big of a deal. The aperture on the 28 to 400 and the 100 to 400 would even make it better for portraits than this. And so I don't think that this is a terrible lens at all. I think it's a good like first lens, only if you get it with the Nikon Z5. Like don't buy this outright. Like it should be almost free if you get a Z5. It's a great first lens, but otherwise, you know, you would never buy it because it's awkward. 24 to 50 is an awkward focal range, and having portraits at 50 millimeter at 6.3 kind of sucks. So moving that around a little bit, that brings the 28 to 400 to second to last place, the 100 to 400 to third to last place, which is 20th place. And then in 19th place, we have our 24 to 200 f4 to 6.3, but it's still an honorary last place. Cutting in real quick, I'm Z-Wade. Don't worry, not in my skivvies. I just want to take a second to thank our 2 sponsors. If you're thinking about picking up any of this gear, I hope you'll choose to do it through the link in the description to Adorama. The other stores don't believe in me, but Adorama believes in this mission.
Oh! Somebody! Oh! He needs some milk!
Damn, did you hear? I don't know what this mission is, it just sounded good. Since these are portrait lenses we're talking over here, you have got to check out Aperty. Aperty took the retouching process, which took hours upon hours or even days, and they turned it into like a slider system. How crazy is that? And instead of going photo by photo, you could literally edit the first one and then just apply that to all of the photos in just one batch movement. I didn't recover hours of my workflow, I recovered days and even weeks in some cases. Thank you Aperty and thank you Adorama, links will be in the description. Let's get back to the ranking. So for 7th place, I want to give it to the 24 to 120 f4S. Now why would I do this instead of the 24 to 70? 24 to 70s mid-range zooms they seem to be more common. Well, because they have the same constant f4 aperture, they're both S-line, they both have good color, good contrast, or great color, great contrast. They're both great lenses. But f4 at 120 is a lot more beautiful for portraits than 70mm at f4. This lens, by the way, has such a great reputation. I don't think anybody's going to argue with this. They may say that it belongs higher, but you know. Actually, I may need to move that down already because the 70 to 180 f2.8, the only thing better than, 120mm at f4 is 120mm at f2.8. And so we're going to knock down the 24 to 120 because you just can't deny, the usefulness of a telephoto zoom, a 70 to 200 or 70 to 180 f2.8. They're so popular in portraits and it just makes sense. And I kind of want to move this down and move this back up to 8th place. And I kind of want to move this to here and put the 85 1.8 in 7th place because 70 at f2.8 is not as good in my opinion for portraits as 85 at f1.8. And these are kind of similar in how they produce images. In my opinion, this is the 85-1.8 is sharper, but as far as like the contrast and stuff, they're probably pretty similar. Now for our next rank, I want to do the 50mm f1.8S. I'm going to tell you why. It's not a traditional portrait lens, yes, but it's not like a modern portrait photographer's choice. This lens is really, really fantastic, and I actually want to move the 24 to 120 down, and I want to move the 50-1.8 up. It's just, it's really sharp. It has great contrast. It's very, very sharp. 50mm used to be used for like all kinds of things. That's why they were nifty 50s. They don't get as much love anymore. They're still great for portraits. Not as good as like 120 at, f4. But I think this lens, dadgummit. This is more versatile. Okay, for now, 24 to 120 stays in 9th. 50mm f1.8S stays in 10th. I think I might want to like kind of fill in the bottom a little bit. I'm thinking the 16 to 50 f3.5 to 6.3. I mean, it's plenty sharp. It's okay for your first crop sensor lens. The variable aperture kind of kills it a little bit. I mean, it's still better than a 50mm f6.3 because once you introduce the crop factor on this, it's actually a 75. That's honestly not that much better, but it is better. I don't know if this, I kind of wish I could tie some of these for like lower rankings. Okay, so the NIKKOR Z 28 to 75mm f2.8. I'm back and forth in my own head whether or not I want to drop down the 24 to 120 even lower to make room for this. I don't know. For now, I think I will just continue in the order from best to worst, but I may change my mind on this. I feel like this is probably more popular than the 24 to 120 f4, but I mean f4, in that 100 to 120, it's not that big of a deal for portraits, but man, that's tough. We'll leave it there for now. If you disagree with any of this, let me know in the comments. Heck, some of your guys' input, because I'm doing this on the fly, no script, no nothing. Some of your guys' input may make me change my mind. So for portraits, I think the fact that the 50mm f1.4 will do 1.4, it's not as optically impressive, I would say, as the 24 to 70 f4S. I just really don't like this aperture for portraits, and where this lens lacks in the optical qualities that this one has, because this is an optically awesome lens. It's great color, great contrast, real sharp. This lens, not quite so much, but I feel like most of its shortcomings can probably be made up for in post-processing. And so that is the only reason I think this is a better lens. This is just a better aperture, and this is more versatile, but we're talking 50 to 70. So we're basically talking 50 because 24 isn't allowed in this particular game. Not that I don't love me some wide portraits, but we're putting the 50mm f1.4 in 12th place, and we're going to put the 24 to 70 f4S in 13th place. You can kind of see a trend that variable apertures are not ranking very high, and I'm going to continue with that, and I'm going to put the DX50 to 250 f4.5 to 6.3. We're gonna, and I actually don't think this is a bad lens at all. I thought this lens was really good for what it costs, but we're gonna put that in 17th place. I think that's an okay place for it. And this lens, I actually really like this lens. I had a lot of fun testing this lens. 18 to 140 f3.5 to 6.3. The only reason it's going lower, you know, it's kind of, there's a nice range, portrait range from 50-ish to 135-ish and beyond. That's a nice range, but it's a variable aperture, and I think you're better with constant apertures when it comes to portraits, personally. And that leaves us a couple of lenses. So I definitely can't put the 58mm Noct below this. So why is the NIKKOR Z 50mm f2.8? Why is it lower than all the other 50mm? Well, one, the aperture. It's got the worst aperture. It's also the slowest. It has good color, good contrast. It is a macro lens, so you can do some cool stuff like extremely close to the eye. You can do some cool portraits with it. For portraits, it's just the worst option. It's not the worst 50mm as far as its optical quality goes. I think the worst optical quality is probably the 50mm f1.4. This is probably better optically, but for portraits, it's the worst 50mm. And so we are going to put that, boom, right there in, 15th place, bringing the NIKKOR Z 58mm 0.95 Noct. I feel a little ashamed putting this in 14th place. And I don't want to say it doesn't deserve it. I mean, it's one of the best lenses optically that Nikon has ever made, but it's manual focus. It's really heavy. You're not going to be able to hand hold it at 0.95. You're probably, even on like a tripod, you're barely going to be able to get, you probably won't be able to get an eye in focus at 0.95, because if, you know, the wind blows on your model and pushes them to and fro and side to side, they're going to fall out of the plane of focus. And so I feel like in order to get an eye sharp, you're going to have to shoot this stop down a little bit anyway. The fact that it's so heavy, you may not even be able to get it at f1.8. If you're on a tripod, you definitely can. So I feel like if you're willing to accept the challenge, as I've said before, this will be the best looking image you've ever seen. Absolutely perfect reproduction. It'll be a perfect portrait. It'll be so beautiful. I don't know that I consider it a portrait lens. Can you do portraits with all of this? Yes, absolutely you can. But I don't consider this a portrait lens. I consider this a reproduction lens, like a perfect lens for like reproduction, for taking a picture of something and then going and printing it, because it's absolutely perfect. You know, like taking pictures of artwork or something for reproduction purposes. But I'm going to do a little something, just because of how incredibly this lens does render, and the fact that it would technically be incredible portraits if you could nail it. We're going to give it an honorary 3rd place. So the final scoring, maybe, if I don't change my mind as I go. In 1st place, we have the NIKKOR Z 135mm f1.8S. In 2nd place, a very close 2nd place, we have the NIKKOR Z 85mm f1.2S. In 3rd place, we have the NIKKOR Z MC 105 f2.8S VR. In 4th place, we have the NIKKOR Z 70 to 200mm f2.8S. In 5th place, we have the NIKKOR Z 50mm f1.2S. In 6th place, I'm going to switch this. If we're talking just portraits for the sake of being portraits, in 6th place, we have the NIKKOR Z 85mm f1.8S. And then in 7th place, we have, nope, optically, it's beautiful. I was thinking about switching these, the 7th and 8th place, because, 70 to 180 is going to give you better backgrounds for portraits, but the difference between the optical quality of these is enough that I will leave in 7th place the NIKKOR Z 24 to 70 f2.8s. In 8th place, we have the NIKKOR Z, probably Tamron made, but Nikon branded 70 to 180 f2.8. In 9th place, we have the NIKKOR Z 24 to 120 f4s. In 10th place, we have the NIKKOR Z 50mm f1.8s. In 11th place, we have the 28 to 75 f2.8. In 12th place, we have the NIKKOR Z 50mm f1.4. In 13th, we have the NIKKOR Z 24 to 70 f4s. In 14th place, we have the NIKKOR Z 58mm 0.95 Noct, but that has an honorary 3rd place. In 15th place, we have the NIKKOR Z MC 50mm f2.8. In 16th place, we have the NIKKOR Z DX 18 to 140 f3.5 to 6.3. In 17th place, we have the NIKKOR Z DX 50 to 250 f4.5 to 6.3. In 18th place, we have the NIKKOR Z DX 16 to 50 f3.5 to 6.3. In 19th place, we have the NIKKOR Z 24 to 200 f4 to 6.3, but it has an honorary last place. In 20th place, we have the NIKKOR Z 100 to 400 f4.5 to 5.6s. In 21st place, we have the NIKKOR Z 28 to 400 f4 to f8. And in 22nd and last place is the NIKKOR Z 24 to 50 f4 to 6.3. Let me know in the comments how you would rank these. I'm Z-Wade, the Z-Wade, and Z-Wade Photo, and let the comment fights begin. I'm kidding, I'm sensitive. Stay sharp, YouTube.